Welcome back. We're examining America's approach to foreign policy and how it ties closely into its military culture. Our guest is Dr. Andrew Bacevich, who teaches history and international relations at Boston University, from where he joins us. His latest book is The Limits of Power, The End of American Exceptionalism, and it argues that Americans are in denial about the limits of their power and influence. Now, Professor, if we could get back to a response perhaps to Juliana's comments on how Barack Obama might engage, or at least she hopes he might engage differently with African leaders and perhaps change that culture of aid and sort of imposition that she feels the previous administrations have held.
Yeah, I guess I would say two things. The first has to do with the Bush administration's policies. I'm certainly very critical of the Bush administration in many respects, but it seems to me that we ought to give President Bush some credit for the significant increase in the U.S. effort to address the problem of AIDS and other infectious diseases in Africa. I think that's been tremendously commendable, and we ought to take note of it. Whether or not we're going to see a lot of change with the Obama administration, yes, we're going to see an increased interest in Africa. I think that that's probably one of the signature elements of democratic foreign policy. We saw increased interest in Africa when Clinton was president. But I would want to urge that there not be any expectations about great change. Again, the bottom line is that the United States, regardless of which party is in power, acts in pursuit of its perceived self-interests. And the perceived self-interests of the United States in Africa are real, but they are limited. Given that U.S. power is itself very limited, then strategically more important regions, such as the greater Middle East, are more likely to command President Obama's primary attention.
So we'll get on the line from London, Kassim, who's been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Kassim. What's your question?
Yeah, hi. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I would like to ask you, Doctor, you know what's happening now, my homeland, Somalia, what the virus is doing to our people, how they're giving us the bad headlines around the world. Will America accept the failed state of Somalia, what they caused to us? Because when Islamic courts were ruling Somalia in 2006, there were few or there were no even piracy. But now you can see, because of the Islamic courts was driven out of the country by Ethiopian forces, given chance by the Americans. Will America accept that what is done to Somalia and what is done to my homeland?
Okay, that's right. So, I mean, actually, there's the issue of America's policy in a place like Somalia and how perhaps America might have to take responsibility for some of its policy actions in the past.
Well, we don't have a very good track record of taking responsibility for errors in the past. I'm not sure that this applies to other peoples in the world, but Americans tend to have a fairly short memory. Americans tend to prefer a sanitized version of their own history. Americans tend not to be self-critical. So I think any expectations that the United States is going to take any responsibility for the current situation in Somalia, anybody who hopes that is likely to be disappointed.
Okay, Kader is on the line from Atlanta, Georgia. Kader, what would you like to ask?
Yes, Riz, I'm a big fan of your show.
Very kind, thank you.
You're doing a great job. My question to the professor, I'm a Republican and I vote this time for Obama. And the same reason why the professor chose to vote for Obama. My question to the professor, do you think Obama is going to keep his promises, what he told us regarding what we call the international or the interests of the United States around the world?
Okay, can he keep his promises?
He'll keep some, he'll violate others. I mean, let's take the case of Iraq. And again, at the beginning of his campaign, getting out of Iraq as fast as possible was probably his #1 foreign policy promise. My own sense is that there really is a consensus now forming about Iraq, and the consensus is one that everybody agrees the United States needs to get out. This new status of forces agreement that was just signed with the Iraqi government is one that indicates clearly that Iraqis want the United States out. They don't want the United States out tomorrow, but they want the United States out pretty soon, not later than 2011. My assessment is that the United States military wants out of Iraq. They don't want to abandon Iraq overnight, but they want to reduce the commitment there, which is indeed overtaxing our forces. Obama and his supporters want out. And I think that the consensus is going to be one in which we're going to see hammered out in Washington a policy of progressive, fairly gradual drawdown of U.S. troops. It won't be a drawdown that will be fast enough to satisfy Obama's most passionately anti-war supporters, but that war is going to come to an end.
All right. Professor, before I take another caller, let me quote another passage from your book where you talk about America's army. And here you say America doesn't need a bigger army. It needs a smaller, that is to say, more modest foreign policy. Now, to what extent has America missed a generation, that is to say, failed to cultivate perhaps a generation of potential diplomats while it's been on its sort of international warpath, while it's been focused on military activity? Perhaps the chance to cultivate a whole generation of those who are internationally savvy as diplomats may be missed.
Well, you might be onto something there. I mean, my own sense is that the great emphasis on military power, the confidence in American military preeminence that really has been very much part of the American worldview since the end of the Cold War, has not only caused us to place too much emphasis on military power, but it has probably caused us to de-emphasize and underinvest in other forms of power. I think a good example would be public diplomacy. In a sense, one of the great concerns about your TV network in Washington, D.C., I'm not trying to say I share this view, but one of the great views about the concerns about your TV network is that the United States no longer has the capacity to communicate in a credible way to people around the world. And this administration has been scrambling to try to recreate or reinvent that capacity, and it has not done a very good job at it. So yes, we've paid too much attention to military power, too little attention to alternative ways of communicating or influencing the world.
A couple of quick questions to get in here if we can. Safdar in Dubai, thanks for your patience. Go ahead, and a brief one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Andrew. My question is related to Pakistan. Pakistan has an enormous, sizable army, and it has always been supported by the United States in form of defense funding, and recently a massive funding against terrorism. All the products, all the bad elements, everything which has gone wrong in Pakistan since 1958. We had 3 terrible dictatorships. The maximum support has come from America. And now we are stuck with a situation where the people of Pakistan are not responsible. In political turmoil and changes in America, at the end of the day, the normal Joe Bloke of Pakistan has to suffer.
All right, so Safdar, let me, because we're running out of time, so less than a minute to go. I've got, Professor, a comment on how America's taken its approach to allies. Could you see any change in that?
I think I'd like to comment on the Pakistan thing,
yes,
and I mean this quite seriously. And I do not mean this as an American who wants to discount or ignore the negative effects of U.S. policy in other parts of the world. And I think Pakistan is a very good example of that. But I mean this quite seriously. If the people of Pakistan think that the United States is going to fix the problems of Pakistan, then the people of Pakistan are going to wait for a long, long, long time. It might be nice if it were otherwise, but that's just the way it's going to be. Right. And to the extent that Pakistan has problems that are political or economic, the key to Pakistan's success, Professor, is for Pakistan to address its own problems.
All right, I have to stop you there, I'm afraid, but sir, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you, and good luck with the book.
Thanks very much. I appreciate being on the program.
Thank you, sir. On the next one, we look at the global economic crisis and possible solutions to the impact it's having. Is a change in the world monetary system required? Catch us all next week in Mumbai too, India's commercial capital, looking at what's in store for the country as it rises to the status of economic giant. We'll be at a special time all next week, 1400 GMT. From me and the team, see you then.